Imagine installing a Linux distribution that refuses to be boxed into a single identity, a system that can quietly change its personality depending on what you need at that exact moment. That is the core idea behind Chameleon Linux, a distribution that most people have never tried, not because it lacks power or vision, but because it deliberately stays under the radar. Chameleon Linux is built around adaptability, flexibility, and the idea that one operating system can behave like many different systems without forcing the user to reinstall, reconfigure from scratch, or lock themselves into one workflow forever. When people usually talk about Linux distros, they talk about fixed identities. Ubuntu is beginner-friendly, Arch Linux is minimal and DIY. Kali Linux is for penetration testing, Fedora is cutting-edge, Debian is stable. Chameleon Linux challenges this entire mindset by asking a simple question. What if a Linux system could change its role as easily as a chameleon changes its color? At its heart, Chameleon Linux is not just another desktop operating system. It is more like a framework or a base environment that is designed to reshape itself. The idea is that instead of choosing a distro for one purpose and then living with its limitations, you install Chameleon Linux once and then adapt it over time. One day, it can feel like a lightweight workstation optimized for older hardware. The next day, it can behave like a developer-focused system with the latest tools, and later, it can transform into a hardened, security-focused environment. This adaptability is not magic, and it is not marketing hype. It comes from a thoughtful combination of modular design, flexible package management strategies, configurable system profiles, and a philosophy that puts control back into the hands of the user. To understand why Chameleon Linux exists, you need to understand a long-standing problem in the Linux world. Linux gives freedom, but that freedom often comes with fragmentation. New users are overwhelmed by choice, while experienced users often end up distro hopping, reinstalling their systems again and again in search of the perfect balance. Chameleon Linux was born from the frustration of reinstalling and reconfiguring. Instead of forcing you to jump from Ubuntu to Arch Linux to Fedora just to experience different workflows, it aims to let you shift those workflows within a single installation. The system encourages experimentation without punishment. If you want to try a rolling release style setup today and a more conservative, stable environment tomorrow, you can do that without wiping your disk. One of the most interesting aspects of Chameleon Linux is how it approaches system profiles. Rather than treating the operating system as one monolithic setup, it allows you to switch between predefined or custom profiles. A profile might define which repositories are active, which package sets are installed, how often updates are pulled, and even how aggressive the system is about using new kernels or experimental software. For example, you could have a stable profile for daily work, focused on reliability and long-term support packages, and a cutting-edge profile that tracks newer versions of compilers, desktop environments, and drivers. Switching profiles does not feel like reinstalling a new OS. It feels more like changing gears in a car. Another reason Chameleon Linux stands out is its attitude toward desktops and user interfaces. Most distributions either ship with a single desktop environment or offer multiple editions that you choose at download time. Chameleon Linux treats the desktop as just another layer that can be swapped or reshaped. Whether you prefer GNOME, KDE Plasma, XFCE, or a tiling window manager, the system is designed to support switching without breaking everything underneath. This is especially appealing for users who like to experiment with workflows. You might start with a traditional desktop layout while learning the system, then gradually move to a tiling window manager as your confidence grows, all without leaving the same base installation behind. The adaptability of Chameleon Linux is also visible in how it handles software sources. Many Linux distributions commit strongly to one package management philosophy. Some rely purely on stable repositories, others embrace rolling updates, and some add Flatpak or Snap support as an afterthought. Chameleon Linux tries to unify these approaches. It is designed to work comfortably with multiple software delivery methods, allowing the user to choose what makes sense in each situation. You can rely on traditional packages for core system components while using containerized applications for desktop software that benefits from isolation or newer versions. This layered approach helps reduce dependency conflicts and makes the system more resilient to change. Performance tuning is another area where Chameleon Linux quietly shines. Instead of assuming one set of defaults is right for everyone, it allows the system to be tuned for different hardware and use cases. On a low-end laptop, Chameleon Linux can be configured to minimize background services, reduce memory usage, and prioritize responsiveness. On a powerful workstation, it can be tuned to take advantage of multiple cores, faster I/O, and modern graphics hardware. The same installation can move from one machine to another and adapt accordingly, which makes it attractive for users who upgrade hardware or repurpose old systems. Security is not treated as a separate edition or a special spin. In Chameleon Linux, security is something you can dial up or down depending on your needs. For everyday desktop use, you might prefer convenience and minimal prompts. When working on sensitive projects or testing software, you can enable stricter policies, additional hardening features, and more aggressive update schedules. This approach acknowledges a reality that many users face. Security needs are not static. They change depending on context, and the operating system should be able to reflect that. One of the reasons Chameleon Linux remains relatively unknown is that it does not chase hype. It does not try to compete with mainstream distributions by advertising itself as the best for beginners, or the ultimate replacement for Windows. Instead, it speaks to a quieter audience, users who enjoy understanding their systems and shaping them over time. This does not mean it is unfriendly to newcomers, but it does expect a certain curiosity. Chameleon Linux rewards users who like to learn how things work, who enjoy tweaking, and who see their operating system as a living environment rather than a finished product. The learning experience with Chameleon Linux is also different. Instead of pushing users toward one official way of doing things, it encourages exploration. Documentation tends to focus on concepts rather than rigid step-by-step instructions. This helps users build transferable knowledge that applies beyond one distribution. When you learn how Chameleon Linux manages profiles, repositories, and system layers, you are also learning deeper Linux principles. Over time, this makes you a more confident and capable Linux user, even if you eventually move on to something else. From a practical perspective, Chameleon Linux can fit into many real-world scenarios. A student can install it once and adapt it as their needs change from basic coursework to programming, data analysis, or creative work. A developer can maintain different profiles for testing software against stable and cutting-edge environments. A hobbyist can experiment freely without the fear of breaking their main system. Even system administrators can appreciate the idea of a base system that can be reshaped for different roles without constant reinstallation. Another fascinating aspect is how Chameleon Linux handles updates. Updates are not treated as an all-or-nothing event. Instead, the system allows more granular control. You can decide which parts of the system should stay conservative and which parts can move faster. This reduces the anxiety that many users feel around updates, especially in rolling release distributions where a single update can sometimes introduce unexpected changes. With Chameleon Linux, updates become a tool rather than a risk. Community plays an important role in shaping Chameleon Linux, even if that community is smaller than those of mainstream distros. Because the system is so flexible, users often share profiles, configurations, and ideas rather than just installation guides. This creates a culture of customization and collaboration. Instead of saying, "This is how you must use the system," the community tends to say, "This is how I use it," and you can adapt it to your own needs. That mindset aligns perfectly with the philosophy of adaptability. It is also worth talking about the psychological side of using a system like Chameleon Linux. Many Linux users suffer from constant dissatisfaction, always wondering if another distro would suit them better. This leads to endless distro hopping. Chameleon Linux addresses this by reducing the need to hop. When you feel bored or limited, you change the system instead of abandoning it. Over time, this can lead to a deeper relationship with your operating system. You stop seeing it as a disposable tool and start seeing it as something you grow with. Of course, Chameleon Linux is not perfect, and its flexibility can be a double-edged sword. New users who want everything decided for them may find it overwhelming at first. The freedom to adapt also means the responsibility to make choices. If you prefer a system that comes with one clear path and minimal decision-making, a more opinionated distribution might suit you better. Chameleon Linux assumes you want to be involved in shaping your system, at least to some degree. Another challenge is visibility. Because Chameleon Linux does not aggressively market itself, many users simply do not know it exists. It does not always appear in top 10 distro lists or recommendation videos. This is part of why it earns the description of the most adaptable Linux distribution you never tried. It quietly exists for those who stumble upon it or actively search for something different. When you look at the broader Linux ecosystem, Chameleon Linux represents an interesting direction. Instead of creating yet another distro with a fixed identity, it explores the idea of fluid identity. In a world where computing needs change rapidly, from remote work to development to creative projects, this approach makes a lot of sense. Rather than forcing users to choose one identity at install time, it lets identity evolve. Using Chameleon Linux over a long period can change how you think about operating systems in general. You start to see the OS not as a product with a fixed purpose, but as a platform that supports many purposes. This mindset can carry over into how you approach software, workflows, and even problem solving. Flexibility becomes a feature you actively value. In the end, Chameleon Linux is not about being flashy or revolutionary in obvious ways. Its strength lies in subtle design decisions that prioritize adaptability. It respects the user's time by reducing the need for reinstalls. It respects the user's curiosity by allowing exploration. It respects the reality that no single configuration is perfect forever. For users who are tired of choosing between distros and would rather shape one system to fit their changing needs, Chameleon Linux offers a compelling alternative. So if you have been using Linux for a while and feel the familiar itch to try something new, but you are also tired of starting from zero every time, Chameleon Linux might be worth a serious look. It may not shout for your attention, but once you understand its philosophy, it has a way of quietly sticking with you. It is adaptable, patient, and flexible, much like the creature it is named after. And in a Linux world full of strong opinions and fixed identities, that adaptability might be its greatest strength.